Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered, and welcome to my first solo episode. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. I am recording this on January 17th at about 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which means that anything that happens between now and when this gets posted on January 20th is not my responsibility. I do want to say happy Inauguration Day and happy first day of the TikTok ban. As of right now, that is still going into effect. It seems like the last few days I can't go 3 minutes without a news alert. I did get the alert that the Supreme Court said that TikTok could in fact be banned, so that's not looking very promising. And I also got one just a couple hours ago that said that Trump's inauguration will likely be held indoors, which is a little bit funny to me considering he threw a fit about the flags being flown at half-staff. Why are the flags being flown at half-staff? Because Jimmy Carter is dead. Seems like a pretty good reason to have the flags flown at half-staff, but he threw a fit, and Governor Greg Abbott complied and said, "We're gonna fly the flags at full staff." And then who bowed down? Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, said, "Actually, ours too. This is a joyous day of celebration." No, it's not, but I digress. Anyways, let us get into the rundown. This is a collection of stories from the last couple of weeks. This is clearly not everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. This is more the stories that you're not really getting on the headlines, I guess. These are just stories that I found personally interesting, silly, or a little bit informative. First up, Mike Johnson, the representative from Louisiana, has held on to the gavel and retained the speakership. Even amid mounting challenges, there was genuine concern that he was not going to become speaker. Donald Trump eventually backed him, which kind of secured the deal. Since taking office, he faced a fractured Republican caucus, the whole budget issue, barely getting stuff passed, and intense scrutiny over his leadership style. However, he's been able to navigate these internal disputes and maintained a very, very delicate balance to secure his position. What I find most funny about this man is that when he was made speaker a couple years ago, my first reaction was, who is that guy? I've never heard of that guy in my life. So I'm not really sure where he came from, but he seems to be doing an okay job. Best of luck to him, I guess. In people being rude news, Deb Fischer, the senator from Nebraska's swearing-in ceremony, got some unexpected attention, not for the senator herself, but for her husband's actions. As Vice President Kamala Harris presided over the event, Fischer's husband, Bruce Fischer, appeared to deliberately avoid making eye contact with or shaking hands with Harris, which sparked a wave of reactions online. The conservatives cheered and said he was a hero, and critics questioned whether his behavior was intentional or an awkward misstep. In his defense, he was holding the Bible in one hand so his wife could swear in and a cane in the other. It's become a really bizarre talking point. It's hard to imagine what I would do in that position because actually, no, I'd probably shake J.D. Vance's hand just to tell him that I hated his book. But I like to think that I would be the bigger person and that my husband would be the bigger person and shake the person's hand even if they disagree with them. It's just such a bizarre thing because how do you let politics get so entrenched into who you are that you won't shake somebody's hand? That just seems, one, rude, and also wrong. However, in a similar vein, at Jimmy Carter's funeral, Donald Trump walked up to Mike and Karen Pence, shook Mike Pence's hand. Karen Pence remained seated. In her defense, Donald Trump did try to have her husband killed on January 6th. Mike Pence seems to forgive and forget those good old Christian values, and Karen Pence seems to be the one holding a little bit more of a grudge. Can't say I blame her. If somebody tried to send a violent mob after my husband, I also would be a little bit sad and disappointed. I think it's a little bit difficult to compare these two stories just because there was a violent mob that got sent after Mike Pence, and Deb Fischer's husband is just a guy that, Kamala Harris didn't do anything to Bruce Fischer except exist and maybe have a different opinion than him. So that one also, that Karen Pence, the liberals were kind of praising her and the conservatives were like, thank goodness that she's gone and he's gone. J.D. Vance is our savior now. Anyways, And moving on to Trump's expansionist vision, he's now talking about a new wave of manifest destiny. He's advocating for seizing Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal. Donald Trump Jr. floated the proposal to impose massive tariffs on Denmark until they agree to sell Greenland. The move is intended to secure strategic Arctic resources. Trump is framing it as a national security thing, but I think most people are going, I don't really know what that means. They're just cheering because now we are giving empire, I guess. It's raised some backlash, both domestic and international, and raised questions about what exactly his priorities are. He also reiterated the importance of revitalizing the Panama Canal Agreement and handing the canal back over to the United States, suggesting that it's time for a renegotiation to bolster American economic and military interests. This does come in his defense at a time when China is really expanding their influence into South America. There are lots of projects that are done by China in South America, and I can see why this makes people a little bit worried. However, I don't think that taking back the canal accomplishes the same thing that China is doing, which is paying for stuff. We just seem like the a-holes, if you will, when we march in and take something and say, give me that back. I was just kidding about that whole agreement. You can't have it. If we are trying to compete with China and South America, we should be funding infrastructure projects, not stamping our feet and throwing a tantrum. Anyways, then we also have Canada. Donald Trump has joked about Justin Trudeau, who is no longer the leader of Canada. He has joked about him being the governor of Canada and Canada being the 51st state. This is problematic at best. There were lots of conservatives that were like, it's just a joke. He doesn't actually mean it. It's still rude. It's still rude. If Justin Trudeau had tweeted and said that he was going to take America and divide it into be more of Canada's provinces and then called Donald Trump the junior prime minister, his supporters would be having a stroke and an aneurysm all at once. So I also think it is important that we take these things at least half seriously. There's lots of stories that have come out of the first administration that said that he would suggest these crazy things, and then the only reason that they didn't happen was because people stood up and said, hey, you can't do that. That's illegal. That goes against our treaties, whatever it may be. And it is unclear at this point how much pushback there is going to be in the new Trump administration. So until we figure that out, I think it is important that we take the things that he says seriously, because doing any one of these things would be problematic at best. Anyways, moving on to the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett is facing conservative backlash after her recent ruling on Trump's request to get rid of his sentencing date. It sparked outrage among her once ardent supporters who accuse her of betraying their values. It was a really funny day on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, when she sided with the liberals to not get rid of his sentencing date. And then the conservatives would all tweet and they'd be like, she sucks. I told you she was a deep state plant. And then the community notes would come and find their old tweets from 2020 where they were like, I love her. You know, she's going to be the best conservative justice ever. I think what people are failing to understand is that the Supreme Court is supposed to be independent. They are supposed to rule with what they think the Constitution is saying. And while there are conservative justices and liberal justices that tend to vote in the same block, they do have the freedom to interpret the law in a way that pushes them with the other side. And that's fine. That's just how the Supreme Court works. And I'm not claiming to be her biggest cheerleader. I think she's unqualified and should not be on the Supreme Court. But watching them eat their own is a little bit funny. It's a little bit funny. Moving on to scary news. The Trump team is asking about loyalty in the NSC. According to a PBS article posted on January 13th, quote, incoming senior Trump administration officials have begun questioning career civil servants who work on the White House National Security Council about who they voted for in the 2024 election, their political contributions, and whether they have made social media posts that could be considered incriminating by President-elect Donald Trump's team. This is so wrong on just so many levels, but primarily because civil servants are supposed to do their work in a nonpartisan way. And 99% of the time, they're pretty good at doing that. If a civil servant says no to doing something, it's probably because they feel that it is going against the betterment and security of the country rather than they disagree with the person. Both can be true, but it's probably because they feel that it is an active threat to the country rather than making it better and safer. Second of all, it just looks like he's trying to put sycophants and keep sycophants in the government, people that are always going to say yes, never going to question anything, people that are just going to say, oh, aye, you've got it, sir. And that's a problem. When I got my master's in DC, there was a time where I thought that I would stay and work in DC, maybe for the government. And I also knew that in doing that, I would have to work under Republican administrations. And with that, while I might not agree with how Republican administrations wanted to handle certain things, knowing that that was part of the job, that was what I signed up for. And it makes me sad and scared for my friends and the people that I know that work in the government or government adjacent that are being targeted when ultimately they chose this career because they wanted to make the world a better place. It's not exactly a career that you go in to make a lot of money. It's a career that you go in because you care about what this country is and what it becomes. And I think what needs to be understood is, first of all, when they're talking about civil servants are what the conservatives have targeted as the deep state. Civil servants are these unelected bureaucrats that make up the deep state. They are unelected bureaucrats because even though there are tons of positions that turn over every time a new president comes into office, there are also positions that need to be maintained no matter what the administration is. Because if every 4 years or every 8 years, they had thousands of new people coming in, nothing would get done because new people would come into these jobs and not know how anything works. Having these career civil servants, unelected bureaucrats, is integral to keeping stuff moving. And I don't think that that's understood. Not to mention a loyalty test is actual insanity. That's not productive. All that does is run people out that genuinely care about their job and what they're doing. Moving back to Congress, they voted to ban trans athletes from sports in all schools that are federally funded. The bill passed 218 to 206 with all Republicans and 2 Democrats voting in favor. It still needs to go to the Senate and pass, but no matter where you stand on this issue, it's insane to me, and I think a lot of people would agree, that they are legislating this very minuscule portion of the population. And not only would this be a logistical nightmare to implement, but it cannot be understated how heavily they've pressed this issue compared to the actual population that they're legislating. My question with this bill becomes, how do you enforce it? How do you ensure that a child is not trans? Do you make the child undress? For who? For school officials? For sports coaches? Do you trust the parent? What if the parent is on board and okay with their child transitioning and the parent, quote unquote, lies? I'm just not sure that there is a way that this bill can be implemented in a way that protects kids. I'd love to hear if you think there's another way that this can be implemented that doesn't scar kids and make them undress for adults that are not their doctor or parent. It is just insane to me that they say these crazy things about trans people. They'll get on the House floor and say they're groomers and they're pedophiles and completely characterizing this whole group of people as these criminals, which is, first of all, factually wrong. Then they come at it with no understanding of what is going on, no compassion, no empathy at all. And I think there is an empathy problem in general, but to discount these people as pedophiles and groomers and use that to say, well, that's why I don't talk to them because they're all pedophiles and groomers. It's wrong. It's so wrong. This law, I think, is only the beginning. I think they will continue to go after trans people in more areas than just sports. sports is the one area where they've been able to point and say, see, that girl's getting hurt. This is a slippery slope, and I do think that things will get worse for trans people in the United States. And this is one of those issues where I hate to be that person, but like, mind your business. If somebody is trans and you don't agree with it, it even sucks to say don't agree with it, because why do you care? This is a very big instance of mind your business. If somebody wants to be trans, it doesn't affect you. You don't have to take your kid to the drag queen story time. You don't have to associate with trans people if you don't want to. But that's your choice. Your choice is to not interact with people of the trans community. Your choice is not to tell everybody else that they can't be trans. Anyways, I guess we'll see where this ends up. But my last little bit of news is about the confirmation hearings. They were a bit of a hot mess for the two that were kind of the heavy hitters in this week's hearings. There were about 6 hearings, but the biggest ones, of course, were Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi. So we will talk a little bit about them. Pete Hegseth, who is the Fox and Friends weekend host, so that would make him the B team of Fox News. They couldn't get the Monday through Friday guy, I guess. He's accused of cheating on wives, causing many drunken disturbances, including standing up at a bar and yelling, "Kill all Muslims," because that's normal for your Secretary of Defense to do. And also has the inability to run small organizations. There's been a little bit of issues with his organizations being audited because he sucks at running them. In response to being questioned by Mark Kelly about his drunken romps, he responded to nearly every question with the answer, "anonymous smears." Here's a clip.
On Memorial Day 2014, at a CBA event in Virginia, you needed to be carried out of the event for being intoxicated. Senator, anonymous smears. Just true or false? Very simple. Summer of 2014 in Cleveland, drunk in public with the CBA team. Anonymous smears. I'm just asking for true or false questions. True or false answers. Event in North Carolina, drunk in front of 3 young female staff members after you had instituted a no alcohol policy and then reversed it. True or false? Anonymous smears. December of 2014 at the CBA Christmas party at the Grand Hyatt at Washington, D.C., you were noticeably intoxicated and had to be carried up to your room. Is that true or false? Anonymous smears.
He goes on to list a couple more events, and the answer stays consistent: anonymous smears. I'm going to start using that anytime somebody asks me a question about myself that I don't feel like answering. It's just infuriating that he couldn't even give a straight answer. There was another moment, I don't have a clip of this one, where a senator asked him, essentially, you've been accused of showing up to the job drunk. Would you agree or disagree that somebody that shows up to their job drunk, that would disqualify them from being the Secretary of Defense? All he had to say was, yes, I agree, that is a bad thing, and that would disqualify somebody. He did not say that. He instead called it lies. It's just he's given every opportunity to say no. And I know these are under oath, but to not even be able to answer the question and not is just so infuriating and so a stain on this process, because for so many people in the past that have been nominated to these positions, that's the biggest day of their life. That's the best thing that's ever going to happen to them. This is what they've been striving for their whole career. And these confirmation hearings just seem like a stain on that process. But moving on, still to Pete Hegseth, though, Mazi Hirono of Hawaii asked him about following orders from Trump to invade Greenland or take the Panama Canal using military force. His response was, Donald Trump got 77 million votes. Okay. That's not an answer. Here's the clip.
Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force? Or would you comply with an order to take over the Panama Canal?
Senator, I will emphasize that President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful commander.
We're not talking about the election. My question is, would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally, of Denmark.
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so,
again, another non-answer. It shouldn't be a huge deal, and it shouldn't be disqualifying for Trump for his nominees to say, I will not invade a NATO ally. It is just clear from this hearing that I think a lot of Trump's picks are going to buck the international norms. They're going to say we don't care about international law and scrutiny. And I think that's a very dangerous precedent. But moving on from Pete Hegseth to Pam Bondi, who was the Attorney General of Florida, when she was asked who won the 2020 election, she responded, Joe Biden is the president. Pam, that wasn't the question. Here's the clip of that. That was also asked by the senator from Hawaii.
Who won the 2020 presidential election? Joe Biden is the president of the United States.
The senator goes on to say that, she can admit that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. It doesn't make her happy, but she can say that it happened. I'm very much in that camp. Unfortunately, it is very clear that Donald Trump will only surround himself with people that will not say that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Republicans keep getting mad that Democrats keep asking about the 2020 election. But Democrats are going to keep asking about it so long as there are people that refuse to say that Joe Biden won the election in 2020. She also refused to say if she would go after people like Liz Cheney and Jack Smith, which is also problematic. At one point, somebody asked her if she would end birthright citizenship, and she said, I'll have to read up on it. And the guy was like, you still have to read up on the 14th Amendment? These people are just severely unqualified. I do encourage you to go watch at least some highlight clips of the hearings, because they were something special for sure. Infuriating, but definitely a look into, I guess, the psyche of what this administration is going to look like, because at this point it is looking like a bunch of sycophants and people that are just going to say yes to everything he wants, even though, Pam Bondi, she was the Attorney General. She is at least somewhat qualified for this position, and it's a shame that she is then also one of those people that's just gonna do what he says and do what he wants. But in response to people being a little bit hesitant about nominees, this one is about Pete Hegseth specifically, Charlie Kirk got on Twitter X and said, whoever votes against Hegseth will get a primary. That seems like a threat to me. If you have to threaten people with potentially losing their job in order to make them vote for your nominee, I'm pretty sure that means that that nominee is perhaps not qualified or not a good person, or just not fit for that job. The Republican Party at this point is just owes everything to Trump, and it's sad because I think a lot of these senators know better. I think a lot of them don't want Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense, and it's a shame that they feel like they can't speak up. There's been lots of articles and news that have come out that said privately, Republicans were saying, screw this guy, and we're done with him after the 2020 election. And then they went and kissed the ring, and now we're right back where we started. I think after, and I talked about this in my last episode, after the 2020 election, after January 6th, there was a moment where we were like, oh my goodness, it's over. He's done for. And within a month, Kevin McCarthy went and kissed the ring, and now we're right back where we started, and that man's able to be president again. So it's a little bit scary to watch these confirmation hearings, especially to watch the Republican line of questioning. I saw this in a clip. I'm not sure who asked the question, but one of the Republican senators asked him, how many push-ups can you do? And Pete Hegseth responds and goes, this morning I did 5 sets of 47. Okay, what an odd number to make your set. 47, 5 sets of 47. I'm sure if you asked him, he'd be like, I did sets of 47 because Donald Trump's going to be the 47th president of the United States and I'm serving in his administration. What a freak. I not with these people. It's actually a shame that Pam Bondi's pretty because she seems so stupid. God. Anyways, we're going to move on now to this segment that I'm trying out called The Worst Takes That I Saw on Twitter this week. They're not even worst takes. They're just entertaining tweets that I found. And I believe that many people should see them because there's not a lot of people left on Twitter, and especially not ones that scroll it. So starting out strong, we have Laura Ingraham. She is a Fox News host of the Ingraham Angle. She's been all over Twitter flaming Gavin Newsom. Her brother, Curtis Ingraham, responds to her and says, "The fact that my sister is using the LA fire disaster to attack my great state of California simply to push around twisted propaganda is disgusting and telling of her complete lack of empathy." Thank you, Curtis. We know she has no empathy, though. Then we have, back to the expansionist conversation. Trump said he was going to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who the conservatives, thirst over, tweeted, "Gulf of America has a nice ring to it," to which somebody responded and said, "Hi, Anna, I can't afford eggs." This ties back to the conversation about what are the priorities? What happened to him running on making everything cheaper and all those things we saw about, oh, now that he's president, I'm going to be able to own a house. In what world does renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America accomplish that? Likewise with most of that expansionist agenda. Next up, we have the fight between Nancy Mace and Jasmine Crockett. If you didn't hear about that, Jasmine Crockett and Nancy Mace got into a verbal altercation on the House floor, which ended with Jasmine Crockett ending a sentence with "child." Nancy Mace lost her mind and was like, "Do not call me a child. I am a grown woman." Whatever. And then offered to take it outside. Okay, freak. Anyways, this tweet was by Nancy Mace, and it says, in reference to Jasmine Crockett, "You can take the girl out of Waffle House, but you can't take the Waffle House out of the girl." That is a dog whistle if I have ever seen one. Not only is that just plain wrong, Jasmine Crockett is known for being loud, being outspoken, not caring if her opinions piss people off, and love that for her. And Nancy Mace is a perpetual victim. So, you know what? I also would like to get in a verbal altercation with Nancy Mace, but this tweet is just abhorrent and so wrong. Can you pick something else to make fun of for? Everybody knows that the real quote behind that is racist. You just swapped some words with Waffle House and now all of a sudden it's okay. I don't know. Whatever. Next up, we have, in response to the Hamas and Israel deal, somebody said, "Biden didn't win 2020 and he didn't get the hostages out. Trump did both." Okay, weird thing to be happy about, because you know that the minute this deal goes south, they're going to say, "See, Joe Biden did that deal." Also, Donald Trump is not the president. Perhaps he did some back-channeling, but at that point, it's giving Iran hostage crisis. It's giving Donald Trump as Ronald Reagan and back-channeling and doing shady stuff to ensure that the hostages don't get freed until he gets into office, because if you read up on it, the hostages are due to be released on Sunday, which would be the day before the inauguration. It's got both of their fingerprints all over it. But the issue is that Donald Trump is not the president right now. All right, that is all that I have for you guys. The last 2 weeks of news have been insane. And I think I say that because during the Biden administration, the news was the news. There was stuff that happened in the world, but there wasn't really anything crazy. And I think I forgot how much chaos Donald Trump brings to the news cycle. And we're right back in it, starting off strong with those confirmation hearings. So I'm honestly not looking forward to keeping track of all the crazy stuff that happens in the news. But here we are. If you guys ever find an interesting story, an interesting take that you want me to cover in one of my solo episodes, please feel free to send it to me. I'm not an expert in any of these particular areas. These are, again, just stories that I found that I think are important, or important enough to share with the people of the United States, because a lot of these do end up flying under the radar. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with somebody who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember to keep moving forward. Next episode will be February 3rd, where we'll be learning about the economy, which is a very important topic in regards to the 2024 election. That was a lot of people's top concern. And it turns out a lot of people don't exactly understand what the economy is. So we are going to learn together. All right, I will see you guys then.